Hello, in this video I have two games for you in the Myogi, which is the tier 4 Japanese battleship, and I've just raced through the Myogi to get to the Hosho because in closed beta I really didn't like... Oh, hello Mr. Cleveland, didn't see you there, but thanks for the ram. Anyway, as I was saying, I really didn't like the Myogi, and the Congo after it was better but not great, and the Fuso just didn't really appeal to me that much. So I decided to skip them and, well, basically just leave the Japanese battleships for later. But I was kind of glad that I went through the Myogi in the end, because it's actually changed quite a bit since I last played it. Well, there are two big noticeable differences. The first is that, well, it gets a spotter plane, which... it's useful, but it's very situational, and I've never really found the situations to use it. And the other really big thing it gets is that it now gets anti-aircraft guns, and it actually gets a really good anti-aircraft armament. But you'll see more of that in the next game. And here's me. I've sent up my spotter plane. I was hoping to shoot at that cruiser, but it's actually still out of range. So instead I decided to lob a few shells at this destroyer, even though I know they're not going to hit. That's incredibly long range, and destroyers are a very small and agile target. But we'll take the shot. See, I don't particularly like the Myogi, but I'm starting to think that it's not because the Myogi's a bad ship. It's just that I can't actually figure out a decent way to play it. Like, its kind of obvious advantages is that it's got the biggest guns for its tier, and it's also got the longest range for its tier, and it's the fastest battleship at its tier. So you'd kind of think that the way to play it is to use your speed to keep at a long range, so you can essentially fire on enemies where they can't fire back at you, and unload on them with your very heavy shells. But the downside is you've only got 6 guns, and you simply don't put out damage very quickly, and they're also not very accurate, so you can't reliably hit. Even if you could, you can't reliably hit to do the little damage that you could do, so that's just not really a feasible strategy. And well, the other big advantage the Myogi has is that it's actually got a very, very powerful secondary battery, or secondary gun armament. As in, the St. Louis, the tier 3 cruiser, gets 14 guns as its primary armament. The Myogi gets the same size guns, but it gets 21 of them as its secondary armament. So I mean, you should theoretically be able to park this next to a St. Louis, and the Myogi is going to win. Even without firing its primary armament. But the downside there is that they've only got 3.5 kilometers range, so you have to get really close to use your secondary armaments, unless you've got the commander perk that extends their range. And the Myogi also doesn't have very good armour, so coming in that close to enemies, generally, it's not really that wise, because especially if they're enemy battleships, they should be able to punch straight through your armour with their 12-inch guns, or 14-inch guns if you're going up against a Myogi or a Congo or something. So anyway, in this game, I was kind of heading off towards the west of the map to join up with some of the friendly cruisers that were over on this side, but one of them's destroyed, and I actually just managed to land my first hits on target, and they were... That was a good hit to land. A Citadel hit and 2 regular hits did 12,000 damage. But I'm now switching focus to the battleships in front of me, because the task force, let's call it a task force, the bunch of allies that I was coming over here to support, is basically splitting up, and one of our battleships is kind of heading off by itself with a few destroyers to escort it, while the cruisers that I want to be hanging out with are heading in the opposite direction. So I was thinking at the time that really I should turn around, go with the cruisers. I need them to protect me from the enemy destroyers, but I didn't want this battleship to go out and die by itself, so I decided I'd provide long-range fire support until it became kind of unfeasible for me to turn around. But the Myogi's a fast ship, so you can do things like this occasionally, go off and support an ally even though it's stupid, in the knowledge that you can turn away and get back to your decent allies very soon. But anyway, there's a Cleveland class cruiser here, right on the edge of the map, and it's a very dangerous ship, and it's probably doing most of the damage to my friendly battleship, at least far more than that battleship was doing, so I decided to switch fire to the Cleveland. Fire a broadside, and well, it mostly misses. Actually, it doesn't. It mostly hits. Get 4 hits, but only does 2,000 damage apparently, which means, well, 2 of them overpenetrated because they do 2,000 damage for an overpenetration, which means that 2 shells must have bounced, which is very odd. But I did also do some critical damage there, and we'll see in a moment, well, when the Cleveland gets closer, that it's actually had 2 of its turrets knocked out. I did another critical hit there, but still not a lot of damage. But actually I think you could just see there that one of the turrets at the front and one of the turrets at the rear have been knocked out. So that Cleveland's only firing with half its guns. But unfortunately, my idea of running off and joining up with my cruisers to support me, it's basically gone now. Because between this enemy Cleveland and the aircraft carrier, it's just me. So I basically want to kill this Cleveland quickly, and getting a Citadel hit there really helps. Did 12,000 damage. So obviously 1 Citadel hit and 2 shells passed straight through the Cleveland. But in order to protect my carrier, I've actually turned towards the Cleveland. I'm trying to close the range with it, hoping that my secondary batteries will come into play and essentially gun it down. But they've only got a 3.5 kilometer range, so I have to get very close to use them. And, well, my primary armament was sufficient to finish it off in the end. At that range, the poor accuracy doesn't really matter. And I got, well, a Citadel hit, which you get 10,000 damage per Citadel, so that works out very well. But I've got to continue defending that carrier because there is a Nicholas class destroyer basically heading for the cap. At the moment I don't think it spotted the carrier, but it's getting far too close, and I'm basically the only ship in a position, well, no, I'm not the only ship in a position to intercept. I'm probably the only ship that's going to intercept it though. So I turn back, I ignore that battleship for now, and instead focus on the destroyer. Now the Nicholas class, it's a very powerful destroyer, or I like it. The one thing though is that it's got very weak torpedoes. Actually no, it doesn't. It's got very strong torpedoes, but they've got very short range, so I don't really have to worry about surprise torpedo attacks from that destroyer. But it's disappeared, and I decided to fire a couple of shots off at the battleship behind me in a second, because, well, my guns were rear turrets were facing that direction. They're high explosive shells, so they won't do a lot of damage against a heavily armoured target like a battleship, but do your damage where you can. And now the destroyers definitely fire, well, it's definitely spotted our aircraft carrier because it's firing away at it. But I'm closing the range, which is kind of good. You really want to get about this close to start reliably hitting destroyers. And thankfully, because the Nicholas has very short torpedo range, I can do this without running the risk of being hit by its torpedoes. I'm turning to bring my rear turrets on target, and just as I do that, the battleship that's firing at me managed to destroy one of my turrets. So I have to start reloading it. Well, I fire off there, get a hit, manage to set it on fire, fire off a second turret, a couple more hits there, critical damage. And that's when torpedoes from the Minikaze show up. And basically I turn to try and minimise the damage they'll do, but it's not to be, and that last torpedo just manages to kill me. And essentially that, I knew the Minikaze was around, I knew it was a threat, but I felt that the threat to the carrier was sufficient, that I basically just had to go in a straight line as fast as I could to try and get close to the Nicholas to kill it. But the Minikaze was paying attention and managed to sink me. And, well, two guesses how this game ended up. It was a draw. Basically, that carrier I was trying to survived, but wasn't able to carry the game for us. But still, I did 50,000, or close to 50,000 damage, and probably would have done a bit more if I hadn't... Well, basically, if we had decent cruiser support, they hadn't all gone running off away from the battleships and died, then, well, all of them, I think one of them was doing its job properly, then I probably would have been a lot safer then, probably could have done a lot more damage. But lots of cruisers in this game don't really know how to escort. Speaking of cruisers, check out what this one's doing. It's just rammed one of our cruisers, and I was thinking, no way it's going to just drive in front of me, but it did. And that's actually going to have a pretty big consequence for me. It did only a tiny bit of damage, but I've just spotted the first enemy ship, and I go to use my spotter plane, push the wrong button, and actually tell my damage repair ability and waste it on the damage done by that cruiser. Which is very unfortunate, but it happens. Anyway, scout plane's up now. I'll take a shot. And where are my shells? So zoom out to look for them, and I go, oh no, they're going to miss by miles, way behind the cruiser. So I'm looking for other targets, but this one looks like the best. I've just got to aim further ahead of it. Except now it's no longer spotted, and that cruiser's just disappeared, and that one's behind an island, and well, we're about to stop spotting that one as well. And of course now I'm reloaded and can fire, and the only real viable target is this enemy South Carolina here. So fire off broadside, and it'll take a long time to arrive because this is very long range. And well, I aim too far ahead. South Carolina's a very slow ship, but I'll get another chance in 13 seconds. And I get a bit lucky here because I can see that enemy destroyer is going to essentially come in and cut off the South Carolina, which means that I know the South Carolina is going to have to strike a course very close to these islands. And I fire. I go in to watch the shells as they come in. I didn't actually lead quite enough there, but I managed to get one shot, did 1,000 damage. So that shell actually overpenetrated the battleship, but that's because the American battleships have all or nothing designs, or all or nothing armor layouts, which means they have very thin armor at the bow and the rear of the ship, and as you saw, that shell hit in the rear and punched straight through. We're reloaded, enemy cruiser. Firing off the broadside, managed to clear the island, which I was a bit concerned about, but it worked. And they look good. No, they straddled it. So RNG just wasn't with me in that salvo at least. It was cruiser to the front, a Phoenix, and I'm not really sure what happened here, but I don't notice that I'm actually aiming at the island. I fire off 2 shells, just from my forward guns, which is fortunate because, well, they hit the island, exactly where I was aiming it, but I was trying to actually hit the cruiser behind it, but whatever. It's that Tenru from before. Fire off my rear 2 turrets. Sounds like they missed. So things just aren't really going my way at the moment. Got 1 shot on the enemy, done 1,000 damage because it overpenetrated. And well, the enemy's captured B and C, we hold A, but there are lots of cruisers around here. And we've actually spotted the enemy aircraft carriers, and I really wish I had my spotter plane ready to go right now, because I could possibly be using it to try and shell those aircraft carriers at very long range. But instead I fire a couple more shots at the battleship, because it's really the only target. And I do 16,000 damage. That was 1 citadel penetration and 3 regular shells, or regular penetrations. So, I think my luck has changed. And this enemy cruiser here, everyone's shooting in front of it, and I can see that it seems to be going very slowly. But, while I aim, I know it's going slowly. And well, my shells still land in front of it. Which puts me in a bit of a conundrum here, because I start aiming on it again, and I can see now it's moving a bit faster, but I know I was deceived a second ago, so I'm not sure where to aim. Because even though it's got lots of smoke coming out, it's probably still accelerating, so it's probably not at its full speed. But I take the shots, and well, I get 2 hits. Both over-penetrate, 2,000 damage, but 2,000 damage is still a fair bit for a, I believe that was the Tenru. And here come the enemy torpedo bombers. And fortunately for me, it looks like they are mostly targeting the cruisers in front of me. But this one coming in looks like it's coming at me. Actually managed to shoot down a torpedo bomber there, but I've switched my guns to focus on this one, and I was turning towards it to try and minimise, just try not to give it to my broadside. And then I start turning away from it because it's clearly getting around behind me, so I want to present my rear to it. And I'm not sure if those torpedoes were aimed at me, but they're coming right in, and unfortunately I'm going to take a hit there. And the torpedo bombers behind me, they also fired their torpedoes, but because I was turning away from it, I only take, I think, 2 shots from them. But while that was happening, my anti-aircraft guns were doing their job, and they shot down 4 of the enemy bombers. And the thing about anti-aircraft guns is they're not really there to stop bombers coming and hitting you. They're there to destroy the enemy aircraft, so that the enemy aircraft carrier basically run out of aircraft by the end of the game. And that's particularly important down at low tiers, since well, in this game I'm fighting a Hosho and a Langley, and they would have 50 aircraft between them. So I just shot down close to 10% of the, well, probably, well, you can see there they've got fighters, so I probably shot down more than 10% of their bomber force just in that little bit there. And there were cruisers and destroyers around me, so that was actually pretty costly for the enemy aircraft carriers. Anyway, there are more torpedo bombers coming in, but I take this opportunity to fire away at this enemy cruiser. And those are the enemy cruisers firing torpedoes at me as well. And now again, I'm trying to turn my nose into the torpedo bombers while getting my anti-aircraft guns to fire on them. But that squadron was focusing on the... oh no, it wasn't. It's coming from me. Here we go. Didn't quite do it right. I took a torpedo hit in the bow, but didn't do a lot of damage. Unfortunately, it caused flooding, and I've got another 40 seconds till I can repair that flooding. And I'm not sure what this last torpedo bomber squadron's doing, but it's just kind of flying around me. And I'm actually able to shoot down lots of them, and then it launches its torpedoes well off at that destroyer. But anyway, can now fire on the Hosho. Get 2 hits, 2,000 damage, but I had to, well, I didn't have to, but I fired armor piercing because it was loaded. So they're both over-penetrated, but I've switched to high explosive now, since neither the Hosho or the Langley has much in the way of armor. And I'm just trying to turn to bring my guns around. I'll be able to repair the flooding soon, but that flooding's actually done a lot of damage to me. And in 20 odd seconds I'll be able to repair the damage done as well, which will be very useful right now. Enemy torpedo bombers taking off, and you can see that squadron's down to 3 aircraft, so basically the Hosho is very low on aircraft at this point. I turn into the bombers to try and take the torpedoes on my bow, as you've seen me do, well, probably that last time's the only time I've really done it. Get my anti-aircraft gunners to focus on the squadron of 3, and the squadron behind it's only got 1 aircraft. But I see they've dropped their torpedoes, so I switch fire to the squadron of 1 aircraft. And I actually managed to destroy that one before it gets torpedoes off, and I'm able to sail straight in between the 2 enemy torpedoes. Even though I did kind of, well, it looked like I tried to hit it, but that was just accidental. And now I've set the Hosho on fire, and you see the allied fighters are coming in and doing their job as well. But I managed to shoot down 10 enemy aircraft in this game. Basically, I think they were all battle bombers, and it said there'd probably only be 30 enemy bombers in this game, and you can see my allied fighters also been doing their job, so those aircraft carriers must really be suffering. I managed to get a high explosive shell to hit the Langley there, but enemy destroyers have shown up, so I switch my focus to them since they can kill me very easily. I get a big hit on that one, but the game ends because we've captured all the enemy bases, and well, that's how you win. 19 shots on target, shot down 10 aircraft, 1 citadel hit, so that's 20 shots on target. I was topping my team, and as you see that, well, I shot down 10, and our aircraft carriers between them shot down 30. So those enemy aircraft carriers would have been very, very low on aircraft, which is basically what you want the anti-aircraft guns to do, or it's a situation you want to be in by kind of the end game, just have neutralised enemy carriers, because it doesn't really matter if they're alive at that point or not. But actually it didn't do all that much damage, simply because there weren't actually that many ships for me to shoot at, and the ones that were very lightly armoured, so I can't really use my armour-piercing Citadel hits. They're just not that effective, or they're not that likely to happen, which is what really gets the big damage when you're in your Myogi. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.